How God's love gives you clarity when you feel lost about which decision to make. You are not confused because you lack wisdom. You are confused because too many voices are speaking at the same time. Fear of choosing wrong, pressure to decide fast, expectations from others, and the weight of consequences all compete for your attention. The more you think, the less clear everything feels, and the silence you expected from God feels heavier than the noise. But what if clarity is not missing? What if it is being blocked? When you feel lost about which decision to make, God's love does not begin by giving you an answer. It begins by quieting what is distorting your vision. Because clarity does not come from forcing the right choice, it comes from restoring peace inside you. If your heart feels restless, rushed, or afraid, that tension is not guidance, it is pressure, and pressure always clouds discernment. God's love works differently. It removes urgency, steadies the heart, and simplifies what fear complicates. This message is for you if every option feels heavy, if you are afraid of making the wrong move, or if you feel stuck between waiting and acting. Stay here. Because when God's love leads, clarity does not arrive as noise or panic. It arrives as peace that points the way forward. Confusion is often misunderstood. Many people believe that feeling lost means they are incapable, unprepared, or lacking spiritual maturity. But most of the time, confusion does not come from ignorance. It comes from pressure. Pressure to decide quickly, pressure to choose correctly, pressure to avoid regret, pressure to please others. When pressure builds, clarity retreats. Think about how confusion actually feels. Your thoughts race, yet nothing settles. Every option seems to carry risk. Even good choices feel heavy. You replay conversations, imagine outcomes, and question yourself repeatedly. This is not the absence of wisdom. This is the presence of fear competing with responsibility. God's love never operates through pressure. Love does not rush. Love does not threaten. Love does not demand immediate certainty. When pressure dominates your decision-making, discernment becomes distorted. You stop listening and start reacting. You stop sensing and start calculating. And the more you calculate, the more disconnected you feel from peace. Many people say they are waiting for clarity, but what they are really waiting for is relief from pressure. They want certainty before they move, but clarity rarely comes before movement. It comes when the heart is no longer being pushed from all sides. God's love brings clarity by restoring internal stability first. It settles the heart so the mind can see again. Pressure creates the illusion that everything depends on this one decision. Fear tells you that one wrong move will ruin everything. God's love tells a different story. It reminds you that your life is not fragile in His hands. You are not one decision away from disaster. You are held, guided, and sustained, even when the path is still unfolding. When pressure is high, you may mistake anxiety for intuition. You may interpret restlessness as a sign to act quickly. But urgency is not guidance. Anxiety is not discernment. God's love does not speak through panic. It speaks through peace, even when the choice is difficult. This is why clarity often returns when pressure lifts. Not because the situation changed, but because your heart did. When you stop demanding instant answers, space opens for wisdom to rise. God's love creates that space. It removes the false belief that you must solve everything alone and immediately. You do not need more information right now. You need less pressure. You need permission to pause without guilt. You need to remember that God's love is not watching you anxiously, waiting for you to fail. It is walking with you, steady and patient, guiding you step by step. When you release pressure, confusion begins to loosen its grip. You start to notice which options align with peace and which ones only amplify fear. This is how clarity begins, not with a loud sign but with a quieter heart. And when the heart becomes quiet, wisdom that was already there finally has room to speak. There are moments when no choice feels right. You look at every option and feel the same weight pressing down on your chest. Even possibilities that once excited you now feel draining. This is not a sign that the right path does not exist. It is a sign that something deeper is influencing how you are seeing your options. When every option feels heavy, the issue is rarely the decision itself. It is the emotional state from which you are trying to decide. Fear adds weight. Exhaustion adds weight. Unresolved tension adds weight. And when the heart is carrying too much, even simple choices feel overwhelming. God's love brings clarity by addressing the inner load before addressing the outer choice. Love asks what you are carrying that does not belong to the decision. Are you carrying fear of disappointing someone? Are you carrying guilt from past mistakes? Are you carrying the need to control outcomes? These hidden weights quietly distort discernment. Many people assume that clarity means feeling confident about a choice. In reality, clarity often begins when you recognize why everything feels so difficult. When you acknowledge that the heaviness is emotional, not directional, pressure begins to ease. God's love does not shame you for feeling overwhelmed. It reveals what is influencing you so it no longer controls you. Notice how heaviness behaves. It makes every option feel risky. It magnifies consequences. It whispers that you must choose perfectly or suffer later. God's love dismantles this lie. Love reminds you that growth is guided, not punished. You are allowed to learn. You are allowed to move forward without having everything resolved. When the heart is overloaded, it searches for relief, not truth. This is why people sometimes make impulsive decisions just to escape discomfort. But relief is not the same as clarity. God's love does not push you toward escape. It leads you toward alignment. Alignment feels different from relief. Relief is fast and temporary. Alignment is calm and steady. Relief removes discomfort for a moment. Alignment restores peace even when challenges remain. God's love helps you feel this difference, so you do not confuse urgency with direction. As emotional weight lifts, your perception begins to change. You start to sense which options carry peace and which ones demand self-betrayal. You realize that some paths feel heavy because they are fueled by fear, not calling. Others feel lighter, not because they are easy, but because they are honest. Clarity does not always remove difficulty. It removes confusion about who you are becoming. God's love shows you that decisions are not only about outcomes, they are about alignment with truth, peace, and integrity. When you stop judging yourself for feeling overwhelmed and start listening to what the heaviness is revealing, clarity begins to emerge, not as pressure to choose, but as permission to release what is distorting your vision. This is how God's love guides you. It does not shout which path to take. It teaches you how to recognize what is weighing you down so you can move forward with a lighter, clearer heart. Fear has a subtle way of disguising itself as wisdom. It tells you that caution is maturity and hesitation is responsibility. But when fear leads, clarity cannot follow. Fear narrows your vision until every path looks dangerous and every choice feels irreversible. The fear of choosing wrong does not ask whether a path is right for you. It asks what could go wrong if you fail. It pulls your attention away from peace and locks it onto imagined consequences. You begin deciding from protection instead of truth. And protection, when driven by fear, always clouds discernment. God's love does not guide through fear. Love invites trust before it offers direction. When fear dominates your thinking, even good options feel threatening. You start searching for guarantees instead of guidance. But guarantees are not how God leads. He leads through relationship, not control. Notice what fear does to your body and mind. It tightens your chest. It accelerates your thoughts. It demands urgency. These sensations are not signs of clarity. They are signals that fear has taken the microphone. God's love speaks differently. It calms first. It reassures before it redirects. Many people believe that if they wait long enough, fear will disappear and clarity will appear. But fear rarely fades on its own. It loses power only when it is no longer obeyed. God's love does not require the absence of fear. It asks you not to let fear decide for you. Clarity returns when you stop asking which option guarantees safety and start asking which option aligns with peace. Peace is not excitement, and it is not relief. Peace is steadiness. It is the quiet sense that you are not forcing yourself away from who you are. God's love uses peace as confirmation, not fear as motivation. Fear also convinces you that one wrong decision will undo everything. God's love reminds you that your life is held, not fragile. You are not one choice away from failure. You are being guided, even when the guidance unfolds gradually. This truth loosens fear's grip and allows discernment to breathe again. When fear steps back, clarity does not rush in dramatically. It settles in quietly. You begin to see that some options demand constant self-denial, while others allow you to remain whole. God's love does not lead you through fragmentation. It leads you through integrity. You do not need to eliminate fear to move forward. You need to stop letting it set the direction. When love becomes louder than fear, clarity becomes possible again. This is how God's love restores vision. It does not promise you will never feel afraid. It promises that fear does not have to decide your future. Rushing is one of the clearest signs that clarity is not leading the process. When you feel pressured to decide quickly, something inside you is trying to escape discomfort rather than move in truth. God's love never pushes you into movement before your heart is ready. It prepares the heart first, then the decision becomes clearer on its own. A rushed decision is often an attempt to silence anxiety. You want the tension to stop, the uncertainty to end, the waiting to be over. But ending discomfort is not the same as choosing wisely. God's love teaches patience not as delay, but as alignment. When the heart is steady, decisions stop feeling urgent and start feeling intentional. Notice how God's love affects your inner state. Instead of increasing pressure, it creates space. Space to breathe, space to listen, space to recognize what is truly motivating you. When love leads, you are no longer reacting to fear or expectation. You are responding from clarity. Many people think God guides by speeding things up. In reality, He often guides by slowing you down enough to hear what matters. When the heart is hurried, it listens to noise. When the heart is steady, it recognizes truth. God's love restores this steadiness. Steadiness does not mean certainty. It means groundedness. You may still have questions. You may still feel unsure about outcomes. But you are no longer internally fragmented. The decision no longer pulls you in opposite directions. God's love brings coherence where fear created division. This is why clarity often arrives after rest, prayer, or quiet reflection. Not because the answer suddenly appears, but because the internal chaos is settled. God's love quiets the inner storm, so discernment can rise naturally. When you allow love to steady your heart, something important shifts. You stop asking what will make this easiest and start asking what will keep you whole. You stop chasing relief and start honoring peace. God's love reorients your priorities without forcing conclusions. A steady heart can wait without anxiety. It can move without panic. It can choose without self-betrayal. This steadiness is not something you manufacture. It is something you receive when you stop rushing yourself and trust that guidance is unfolding. God's love does not measure success by speed. It measures it by alignment. When alignment is present, the next step becomes visible. Not loud, not dramatic, simply clear. This is how God leads through love, not by pushing you forward, but by stabilizing you enough to walk forward with confidence and peace. Overthinking feels like responsibility, but it slowly disconnects you from discernment. The mind keeps circling the same options, replaying scenarios, revisiting conversations, and trying to predict outcomes before they exist. It believes that if it analyzes enough, certainty will appear. But clarity does not emerge from mental exhaustion. It fades under it. When you overthink, your attention moves away from truth and toward control. You stop asking what is aligned and start asking how to avoid pain. You stop listening and start managing possibilities. This is why the more you think, the less clear everything feels. Your mind becomes loud, but your inner sense becomes quiet. God's love restores clarity by interrupting this cycle. Love does not compete with overthinking. It invites you out of it. Discernment is not found in repetition of thought. It is found in presence. When your attention returns to the present moment, you regain access to peace. And where peace exists, clarity can breathe. Overthinking creates the illusion that you must understand everything before you move. But discernment does not require full understanding. It requires alignment. Alignment is sensed, not calculated. God's love helps you feel when something is coherent with who you are becoming, and when something forces you to fragment yourself to proceed. Notice how overthinking affects your body. Your breathing becomes shallow. Your shoulders tense. Your thoughts accelerate. These are not signs of wisdom increasing. They are signs of overload. God's love brings you back into awareness of what is happening inside you, because discernment is embodied. It speaks through calm, not tension. Many people believe clarity arrives as a logical conclusion. In reality, clarity often arrives as an inner settling, a quiet recognition. A sense that one option allows you to remain whole while another demands constant self-denial. God's love sharpens this recognition by reducing mental noise. Overthinking also disconnects you from trust. It keeps you focused on outcomes instead of guidance. It convinces you that if you do not foresee every risk, you are being careless. God's love reframes this fear. It reminds you that guidance unfolds in steps, not in guarantees. You are not required to solve the entire future to take the next right action. When overthinking dominates, you begin doubting even your own peace. You question calm moments. You second-guess clarity when it appears quietly. God's love teaches you to trust peace as a valid signal, not something that needs to be justified or defended. This is why simplicity restores discernment. When you stop feeding every thought, the important ones rise naturally. When you stop interrogating every feeling, the honest ones remain. God's love simplifies your inner world so truth is no longer buried under excess analysis. Clarity does not ask you to think harder. It asks you to listen more deeply. Listening requires stillness. Stillness requires trust. God's love invites you into that trust by reminding you that you are guided, not abandoned, even when answers unfold gradually. As overthinking loosens its grip, discernment regains its voice. You stop chasing certainty and start recognizing alignment. You feel steadier, not because every question is answered, but because your heart is no longer being drowned out by noise. This is how God's love restores clarity. Not by adding more thoughts, but by quieting the mind enough for wisdom that was already within you to speak clearly again. There are moments when you believe you are uncertain, but the truth is simpler and more human. You are tired. Emotional exhaustion quietly distorts perception. When your strength is depleted, even clear directions appear blurred. Decisions that once felt manageable begin to feel impossible, not because they are wrong, but because your inner resources are drained. Exhaustion speaks in the language of doubt. It questions everything. It weakens confidence. It makes you distrust your own discernment. God's love recognizes this immediately. Love does not demand clarity from a depleted heart. It offers restoration before guidance because guidance without strength feels like pressure. Many people try to make life-changing decisions while emotionally exhausted. They pray, analyze, wait for signs, and grow frustrated when clarity does not arrive. But clarity is often delayed not because God is silent, but because the heart is overwhelmed. God's love is not withholding direction. It is protecting you from deciding while depleted. Exhaustion narrows your capacity to tolerate uncertainty. Waiting feels unbearable. Silence feels threatening. Ambiguity feels dangerous. In this state, urgency feels necessary, and any pause feels like failure. God's love gently counters this distortion. It reminds you that rest is not avoidance. Rest is preparation. Notice how decisions feel different when you are rested. The same option that felt terrifying when you were drained may feel workable after restoration. The decision did not change. Your capacity did. God's love works through capacity. It strengthens you so discernment can function again without strain. Exhaustion also weakens your connection to peace. When you are tired, peace feels distant or unreliable. You may mistake numbness for calm or anxiety for intuition. God's love restores clarity by reconnecting you to genuine peace, not the absence of feeling, but the presence of steadiness. Many people override exhaustion because they fear falling behind. They believe stopping will cost them momentum or opportunity. God's love offers a different perspective. It teaches that moving forward while depleted often leads to misalignment, while resting at the right time preserves direction. When exhaustion is misidentified as doubt, people often make premature decisions simply to escape discomfort. These choices may bring short-term relief, but long-term confusion. God's love guards you against this by slowing you down, not to delay you but to realign you. Rest restores discernment because it restores honesty. When you are rested, you can sense what is truly yours to carry and what is not. You can feel which options invite peace and which ones demand constant self-protection. God's love uses this restored sensitivity to guide you gently forward. You are not failing because you feel unsure. You are human. And God's love is not disappointed in your need for rest. It honors it. Love knows that clarity grows in an environment of safety, not pressure. When strength begins to return, fear loses intensity. When fear loosens, clarity reappears naturally, not as urgency, not as panic, but as a quiet confidence that you are allowed to move at a pace that preserves your peace. You do not need to force clarity out of exhaustion. You need to let God's love replenish what has been drained. When restoration comes first, direction follows without resistance. This is how God's love gives clarity. It listens to your limits. It respects your capacity. And it guides you forward only when your heart is strong enough to hear without fear. Fear thrives on complexity. It multiplies possibilities, exaggerates consequences, and convinces you that every choice carries hidden danger. The moment fear enters the process, clarity fragments. What once felt simple becomes tangled. What once felt intuitive becomes suspicious. God's love restores clarity by simplifying what fear has distorted. Fear asks too many questions at once. What if this fails? What if I regret it? What if others disagree? What if I miss something better? These questions do not seek truth. They seek control. God's love does not answer fear on its own terms. It quiets fear so the right questions can surface. Love asks fewer questions, but deeper ones. Does this choice align with peace? Does it reflect who you are becoming? Does it require you to live honestly? When fear steps aside, these questions become clear. They do not overwhelm, they orient. Notice how fear complicates decisions by pulling you away from the present. It forces you to live in imagined futures that have not happened. God's love brings you back to now. Discernment lives in the present, not in hypothetical outcomes. When your attention returns to what is real, clarity becomes accessible again. Fear also convinces you that complexity equals importance. It tells you that if a decision feels difficult, it must be significant, and therefore must be overanalyzed. God's love corrects this distortion. Some decisions feel heavy not because they are important, but because fear is attached to them. When fear is removed, weight decreases. Simplicity does not mean the decision is easy. It means the direction is honest. God's love strips away motives that are not rooted in truth. It removes the need to impress, to prove, to protect, or to avoid discomfort at all costs. What remains is a clearer sense of what is yours to do. Fear fragments your attention. Love integrates it. When love leads, your thoughts, values, and peace begin to align. You no longer feel divided inside. Even if the decision is challenging, you feel internally coherent. This coherence is one of the strongest signs of clarity. God's love also simplifies by restoring trust. Trust that you are guided. Trust that you are not alone. Trust that one decision does not define your entire future. When trust returns, fear loses its grip, and complexity dissolves naturally. You may notice that as fear quiets, some options simply lose their appeal. Not because they are wrong, but because they were fueled by anxiety rather than calling. God's love does not force you away from these options. It allows you to see them clearly without attachment. Clarity is not about having many reasons. It is about having the right ones. God's love brings you back to what matters most and removes what only creates noise. When fear is no longer complicating the process, direction becomes visible without strain. This is how God's love gives clarity. It does not overwhelm you with answers. It simplifies your inner world until the next step feels clear enough to take with peace and integrity. Many people expect clarity to arrive with certainty, emotion, or a sudden sense of confidence. They wait for a powerful sign, a strong feeling, or an unmistakable confirmation. When none of that appears, they assume they are still lost. But clarity rarely announces itself loudly. It often enters quietly, almost unnoticed. God's love does not compete with noise. It does not force attention. It settles in gently, bringing calm where there was tension. This is why clarity is sometimes mistaken for indifference. It does not create urgency. It creates steadiness. It does not rush you forward. It stabilizes you where you are. When clarity arrives quietly, it feels like a subtle shift rather than a dramatic change. You may notice that one option no longer drains you the way it used to. Another may stop demanding justification. You feel less pulled in different directions. God's love removes internal resistance before it reveals direction. Dramatic moments excite the mind. Quiet clarity reassures the heart. God's love values reassurance over intensity. It leads you in ways that preserve peace rather than overwhelm it. This is why the right direction often feels calmer than expected, even when it leads into challenge. Silence does not mean absence. Silence often means alignment. When the inner noise fades, guidance becomes easier to recognize. God's love uses silence to clear space, not to confuse you. In that space, clarity can rise without pressure. Many people miss clarity because they are looking for emotion instead of peace. Emotion fluctuates. Peace remains steady. God's love confirms direction through peace, not through emotional highs. When peace stays, even in uncertainty, clarity is present. Quiet clarity also respects your freedom. It does not force obedience. It invites trust. God's love allows you to move forward without fear because it does not coerce you into choices. It supports you as you choose. When clarity comes quietly, you may still have questions. You may still feel unsure about outcomes. But you no longer feel internally divided. That unity is the signal. God's love aligns you before it moves you. This is why clarity often grows stronger after you stop searching for it. When you release the need for dramatic confirmation, peace becomes easier to notice. God's love reveals direction in ways that do not disrupt your inner balance. Clarity does not always feel exciting. It feels grounding. It feels honest. It feels like a gentle yes that does not need to be defended. When you learn to recognize this, decisions become less stressful and more faithful. God's love gives clarity by teaching you to listen for what is quiet, steady, and life-giving. When you stop waiting for noise, you begin to hear what has been guiding you all along. Urgency often disguises itself as responsibility. It tells you that if you do not decide now, you will miss something important. It creates the feeling that time is running out and that waiting is dangerous. But urgency is not the same as divine timing. In fact, urgency is one of the most common reasons clarity disappears. Urgency speaks through anxiety. It tightens your chest, accelerates your thoughts, and convinces you that delay equals failure. Divine timing speaks through peace. It does not deny that movement is needed, but it removes panic from the process. God's love never pressures you into decisions through fear of loss. Many people confuse urgency with calling. They assume that because something feels intense, it must be important. But intensity is often emotional, not spiritual. God's love does not lead by intensity. It leads by alignment. When something is meant to move, you may feel seriousness, but you will not feel chaos. Urgency narrows your vision. It forces you to focus on short-term outcomes and worst-case scenarios. Divine timing widens your perspective. It allows you to see how a decision fits into your growth, your peace, and your long-term integrity. God's love helps you sense this difference internally. Notice how urgency affects your inner state. It makes you restless. It makes silence uncomfortable. It pushes you to act before you feel settled. Divine timing does the opposite. It allows waiting without anxiety. It gives you permission to pause without guilt. God's love reassures you that waiting does not mean stagnation. Waiting under divine timing is active, not passive. It is not avoidance. It is preparation. God's love uses waiting to strengthen discernment, clarify motives, and remove fear-based attachments. When the time is right, movement feels supported rather than forced. Urgency also creates false deadlines. It convinces you that opportunities expire quickly and that mistakes are irreversible. God's love reminds you that growth is guided, not rushed. You are not one moment away from failure. You are being led through a process that unfolds with care. Many people rush decisions because they are uncomfortable with uncertainty. Silence feels threatening. Waiting feels like being forgotten. God's love reframes this experience. Silence is not abandonment. Waiting is not neglect. Often it is protection from acting before you are ready. Divine timing often becomes clear through peace that remains consistent over time. Urgency spikes and fades. Peace endures. When an option continues to feel steady even after emotion settles, clarity is forming. God's love confirms direction through consistency, not pressure. There is also wisdom in noticing what urgency demands from you. Does it require you to betray your values? Does it ask you to ignore your limits? Does it push you to override your peace? If so, it is not divine. God's love never asks you to abandon yourself to move forward. When divine timing is present, movement feels natural. Not easy but honest. You may still feel nervous, but you are not internally divided. Your heart and mind are moving together. God's love aligns them before action begins. This is why clarity often increases when you stop racing against time. When you release the belief that you must decide immediately, your perception sharpens. You begin to see which options were fueled by fear and which ones are rooted in truth. God's love teaches you to respect timing not as delay, but as guidance. It protects you from choices that would cost your peace and prepares you for choices that will grow you. When you learn to distinguish urgency from divine timing, confusion loses its power. Clarity does not demand speed. It asks for trust. Trust that you are being led even when the next step is not yet visible. Trust that God's love is working beneath the surface, aligning circumstances, strengthening your heart, and preparing you to move at the right moment. When you allow divine timing to replace urgency, decisions become lighter. The pressure lifts, fear quiets, and clarity emerges, not as panic, but as readiness. Clarity deepens when three inner signals begin to agree: desire, peace, and wisdom. When these remain disconnected, decisions feel confusing and heavy. When they align, direction becomes visible without force. God's love is what brings this alignment together. Desire alone is not guidance. Desire can be shaped by fear, lack, comparison, or impatience. Peace alone is not guidance either. Peace can be mistaken for avoidance or comfort. Wisdom alone, when isolated, can become cold calculation. God's love integrates all three, so they no longer compete with one another. When God's love leads, desire becomes honest. You stop wanting things to escape pain or prove worth. Your desires begin to reflect who you are becoming, rather than what you are trying to avoid. This honesty removes inner conflict and allows clarity to emerge naturally. Peace becomes reliable when love is present. Not the peace of numbness or withdrawal, but the peace that remains even when the path involves challenge. God's love teaches you to recognize this kind of peace. It does not erase difficulty. It removes inner resistance. You feel steady even while stretching. Wisdom also changes under God's love. It stops being purely logical and becomes discerning. It considers consequences without fear. It evaluates options without panic. It honors limits without guilt. Wisdom guided by love does not pressure you to be perfect. It guides you to be faithful. When these three align, decisions stop fragmenting you. You no longer feel pulled in opposite directions. You may still weigh options, but the internal war ends. God's love creates this coherence. It brings your inner world into agreement so clarity can be trusted. Misalignment often explains confusion. You may desire something but lack peace about it. You may feel peace about waiting but desire immediate change. You may understand what is wise but feel disconnected from it emotionally. God's love does not shame this misalignment. It heals it. As love deepens, you begin to sense which desires carry peace and which ones demand self-betrayal. You notice that some choices excite you but cost your integrity. Others feel quieter, but allow you to remain whole. God's love sharpens this awareness. Wisdom under love also respects timing. It does not rush desire or suppress it. It waits until desire matures into readiness. God's love knows when a desire is an invitation and when it is a distraction. Clarity grows as this distinction becomes clearer. When peace is present alongside desire and wisdom, movement becomes possible without panic. You are no longer forcing yourself forward. You are responding to alignment. God's love makes this response feel grounded, not dramatic. You may notice that aligned decisions feel lighter even when they are serious. The weight of fear lifts. The need for approval fades. You stop asking whether others will agree and start sensing whether you can live honestly with the choice. God's love prioritizes integrity over image. This alignment also brings resilience. When challenges arise after the decision, you do not immediately question the direction. Peace remains as an anchor. Wisdom adapts. Desire stays connected to purpose. God's love sustains the choice beyond the moment it is made. Clarity does not mean absence of struggle. It means absence of inner division. God's love removes division by aligning what you want, what you sense, and what you know to be true. When desire, peace, and wisdom move together, the next step becomes clear enough to take. Not because everything is certain, but because your inner world is no longer at war. This is how God's love gives clarity. It aligns your inner signals until direction feels honest, steady, and trustworthy. Many people delay decisions because they believe certainty must come first. They wait for every doubt to disappear, every question to be answered, every risk to be removed. But certainty is not how clarity works. If certainty were required, movement would never begin. God's love does not wait for certainty. It builds trust. Trust is different from certainty. Certainty wants control. Trust accepts guidance. Certainty demands to see the whole path. Trust agrees to take the next step. God's love invites you into trust because trust keeps the heart open, while certainty often closes it. When you seek certainty, fear stays involved. Fear wants guarantees because it is afraid of pain, loss, or regret. God's love does not promise protection from all difficulty. It promises presence through it. That presence is what makes movement possible even when outcomes are unknown. Notice how certainty feels inside you. It feels tight. It feels conditional. It says you can move only when everything makes sense. Trust feels different. It feels grounded. It allows questions to exist without paralyzing you. God's love strengthens this groundedness so uncertainty no longer feels threatening. Trust grows when you recognize that clarity often appears during movement, not before it. Many times, the next step reveals itself only after you take the current one. God's love guides progressively. It does not overwhelm you with the full picture. It gives you what you need for now. This is why waiting for certainty often keeps you stuck. You're asking for a kind of clarity that removes risk, but growth always includes risk. God's love does not remove risk. It removes abandonment. You move forward, knowing you are not alone. Trust also changes how you interpret mistakes. Certainty fears mistakes because it believes they are final. Trust understands that even wrong turns can be redirected. God's love redeems movement, not perfection. This frees you from the paralysis of needing to choose flawlessly. When trust replaces certainty, decisions feel less threatening. You stop asking whether the choice is perfect and start asking whether it is faithful. Faithfulness does not require full understanding. It requires willingness to be guided. God's love reassures you that your worth is not measured by outcomes. You are not evaluated by how well you predict the future. You are valued because you are held. This truth softens the fear that keeps you frozen. Trust also restores courage. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision not to let fear decide. God's love strengthens courage by reminding you that fear does not own your future. Guidance does. As trust grows, you become more flexible. You allow yourself to adjust, to learn, to change course if needed. Certainty resists adjustment. Trust welcomes growth. God's love favors growth because it leads you deeper into wisdom and humility. You may still feel nervous as you move forward. Trust does not erase nerves. It steadies you within them. God's love anchors you so nervousness does not turn into panic or retreat. Movement under trust feels different from movement under pressure. It feels deliberate, not frantic. It feels supported, not forced. Even when the step is small, it carries meaning. God's love honors small steps because they build confidence over time. You do not need to see where the path leads to begin walking. You need to trust that love is guiding you as you go. When trust becomes stronger than fear, clarity no longer depends on certainty. This is how God's love gives clarity. It replaces the demand for certainty with the strength to trust. And when trust leads, movement becomes possible without losing peace. Many people believe that making the right decision requires sacrifice, but they misunderstand what must be sacrificed. They think clarity demands self-erasure, emotional suppression, or endurance of inner conflict. Over time, they learn to override their own peace in the name of responsibility or obedience. This is not how God's love leads. God's love never requires you to abandon yourself to move forward. When decisions pull you away from your inner stability, something is misaligned. You may still move, but you do so fragmented. You silence intuition. You numb discomfort. You tell yourself it will make sense later. God's love calls you to a different way. It invites you to choose in a manner that preserves wholeness, even when the choice is difficult. Self-abandonment often hides behind noble intentions. You convince yourself that enduring inner distress proves faithfulness. You ignore persistent unrest because you fear disappointing others or missing opportunities. God's love gently corrects this pattern. Love does not ask you to betray your inner truth. It asks you to align with it. Clarity becomes sustainable only when your decisions honor your limits. Limits are not weaknesses. They are signals. God's love respects these signals because they protect integrity. When you override limits, confusion returns. When you honor them, discernment strengthens. Notice how aligned decisions feel. They do not demand constant justification. They do not require you to perform or explain yourself endlessly. Even when they are challenging, they feel internally honest. God's love confirms direction through this honesty. It allows you to move forward without inner resistance. Many people confuse obedience with endurance. They believe that if something feels hard inside, it must be right. But hardness is not a measure of truth. God's love does not glorify inner conflict. It resolves it. When love leads, obedience feels integrated, not fractured. Making decisions without abandoning yourself also means recognizing when something requires you to become someone you are not. God's love does not reshape you through force. It refines you through truth. If a choice demands ongoing self-denial, chronic anxiety, or suppression of conscience, clarity is absent. God's love invites you to choose in ways that support growth without violating peace. Growth stretches you. It does not shatter you. Stretching feels uncomfortable but coherent. Shattering feels chaotic and disorienting. Discernment lives in knowing the difference. When you stop abandoning yourself, decisions become more honest. You stop choosing based on image, pressure, or fear of judgment. You begin choosing based on alignment with truth, peace, and wisdom. God's love supports this shift because it leads you into integrity, rather than performance. This integrity brings stability. You are no longer constantly questioning whether you chose correctly. You trust the process because you honored yourself within it. Even when challenges arise, you do not feel internally betrayed. God's love sustains you through that consistency. Choosing without self-abandonment also restores confidence. Not the loud confidence of certainty, but the quiet confidence of coherence. You feel grounded. You feel present. You feel capable of responding to what unfolds. God's love builds this confidence by keeping you connected to who you are. Clarity deepens when you stop asking what will make others comfortable and start asking what allows you to remain whole. This question simplifies decisions. God's love guides through simplicity because simplicity preserves truth. You are not called to disappear in order to be guided. You are called to become integrated. God's love leads you forward without erasing you. When you learn to choose without self-abandonment, clarity stops being fragile and becomes enduring. This is how God's love gives clarity that lasts. It aligns direction with integrity. It moves you forward without breaking you. And it teaches you that the right path is not the one that costs you yourself, but the one that allows you to walk in truth with peace. When clarity feels distant and decisions feel heavy, Scripture reminds us where true direction begins. As it says in Proverbs 3:5-6, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." This passage does not promise instant answers or perfect certainty. It invites trust before understanding. It calls you to release the need to control outcomes and to allow God's love to guide what you cannot yet see. Direction is not earned by overthinking. It is revealed through surrender. God's promise here is not that the path will always be easy, but that it will be guided. When your understanding reaches its limit, His love continues to lead. This is where clarity begins, not in knowing everything, but in trusting the one who does. Clarity does not arrive when you force answers. It arrives when you allow God's love to quiet what fear has been shouting. You were never meant to decide your future alone or carry the weight of every outcome on your shoulders. When you trust God's love, even without full understanding, your steps become steadier. Peace becomes your signal. Integrity becomes your guide. And trust becomes stronger than fear. You may not see the entire path yet, but you are already being led. God's love is not waiting for you at the end of the road. It is walking with you now, guiding each step with patience, wisdom, and care. You are not lost. You are being led.